Welcome to War of the Stars, a Star Wars podcast, coming to you every week from deep within the Outer Rim, far beyond the westful ice of the Galactic Empire. Join your hosts, John Mark Tolley, Garrett K. Jones, and Brian Karasik, as they discuss the various facets of the saga's lore, characters, review the films, and discuss every tidbit of news coming out of Lucasfilm. And remember, this isn't just my Star Wars, this isn't just your Star Wars, this is our Star Wars. It is indeed our Star Wars. Welcome once again to War of the Stars, a Star Wars podcast. And before we get started with the main topic, which we're going to be talking and reviewing our thoughts on the first movie, the sequel trilogy, The Force Awakens. We are, as you know, as we talked about last week and the week before that, in the middle of our March Wars Madness tournament. And it is time to go to the Elite Eight. But before we do that, we have a couple of ties in the Tatooine indoor match brackets. So, fellas, we need to make a couple of decisions to determine in the we find out in the Tatooine region who will be facing Ahsoka Tano, as Ahsoka Tano beat Cassian Andor 75% to 25%. Will it be Boba Fett or Fennec Shand? Fellas, what say you? Garrett?
I say let's have Boba go up against her because he needs a little bit of redemption after the way his series went.
I got to go with Fennec Shand.
I
think Boba Fett's overrated.
I'm going to agree with Brian and say Fennec. So, in the Elite Eight, in the Tatooine region,
your face shield, Boba Fett.
Ahsoka will face Fennec Shand in the Tatooine regional finals. And also, we have another tie. This one is the one that surprised me the most. In the indoor region, who will face
Did he freeze up?
See. What's that?
You look like you kind of froze up for a moment.
Oh, sorry. Actually, I got that wrong. Fennec Shand will not be facing Boba Fett or facing Ahsoka. She will be facing Bo-Katan. I got that wrong.
She's doomed.
Who beat Din Djarin 85.7% to 14.3%. Actually got the most votes of any. Ahsoka Tano beat Cassian Andor. That was right. But they will be facing either Jyn Erso or number 1 seed Obi-Wan Kenobi. It was a tie, fellas. That one surprised me. I mean, do we really
Jyn's got
need
powers
to
out there?
She does. I mean, you already know I'm voting for Obi-Wan. Anybody not gonna say Obi-Wan?
No,
I like him. He's got my vote.
Okay, Obi-Wan will take on Ahsoka Tano.
Those are my two favorite light side users.
Yeah. So there we go. And what about on your side of the bracket?
So on my side, on my half of the bracket, our first matchup for Coruscant was Vader versus Padme. Brian said he was going to get really choked out about this, or choked up. Vader beat her for votes. I want to be clear on this one. He beat her for votes, 71%. And so he's going to be moving on. And then
yeah, he did.
Qui-Gon Jinn beat General Grievous with unanimously with 100% of the vote. So it's going to be, for Coruscant, it's going to be Vader versus Qui-Gon. And then
Grievous is as we see him on the screen, Grievous is a terrible character. I'm not surprised by that at all.
Yeah. And
If
then
you can't beat Obi-Wan with 4 lightsabers and you're the most advanced cyborg in the galaxy.
yeah, but he was asthmatic.
Don't be ableist, Garrett.
So for the Hoth region, we had Luke Skywalker versus Chewbacca. Luke took the win with 71% of the votes. So 71% of the votes, just like his father before him. And then Leia beat R2. This one was a little closer. She took 57% of the votes. So R2 has a very strong fan base. But the last droid standing is out of the game. So it's going to be the twins versus one another, and then Obi-Wan or Anakin's first master versus Vader. So a little poetic, I think.
I had to slow clap for that, just as my father before, just as his father before me.
I thought you'd appreciate that.
I like that. That was good. That was good. Speaking of just like his father, just like before him, we're going to be talking about. I don't know why I said that, but today we're going to be reviewing The Force Awakens.
Which, to be fair, The Force Awakens is just a rehash of the original film. So it's exactly like Vader before everybody.
It's a rehash of the original trilogy. Each act of the film is a movie from the first trilogy.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Well, first I want to talk before we even get into the movie itself, let's talk a little bit about the hype going into it. And before, like when we first heard that there was going to be a brand new trilogy, that they were going to be doing the sequel trilogy, and just overall the hype, this is before we knew anything. We just knew there's going to be a new trilogy, and that's all we knew. This is something that I don't think, we knew the minute when Disney purchased it. I think that's when the hype kind of began.
Sure, we knew there'd be new movies since
we knew it was going to happen, and
we've been told there weren't going to be any.
Before that, we didn't know that there was ever going to be. We hoped we'd hoped. We thought maybe, perhaps George will do something. Maybe,
but we were all a bunch of jerks to George for 5 years, and so he decided to never make movies again.
Yeah,
you're not wrong.
But I mean, what was when when that happened, when Disney purchased Lucasfilm, and they announced that there eventually were going to be in the works of making a sequel trilogy.
I was stoked. I was excited about it. I was concerned. A lot of fans were concerned that Disney was going to Disneyfy the stories.
Mm-hmm.
To an extent, that's debatable. But I was concerned they were going to put very expensive gates in front of really cool things, which they did do. But it didn't work out for them, Galactic Star Cruiser. So I'm hoping that they're kind of correct from that. But I was excited once Disney bought it. I said, well, great, we're going to have Star Wars for the rest of my life. None of us will outlive Star Wars at this point.
Yeah. For me, the hype was just I was pumped for this new trilogy. I really was, because the first, I've shared before, one of my first memories was seeing Return of the Jedi in theaters when I was a toddler. And getting
inappropriate, Mr. Jones.
I became best friends with my best friend because he had an extra ticket for the opening night of The Phantom Menace. It was the late 90s was this prime opportunity for Star Wars to really flourish, and that's when I got into it in probably the biggest way. So as the movies kept coming out in the prequel series, I was jumping on board. I ditched a final in college to go to see like the earliest matinee I could possibly find of Revenge of the Sith.
I love it.
And it was well worth it. So like it was in fact, as far as movies go, only because the only time I got to see Empire Strikes Back in the theater was when they re-released them to theaters in 1997, 1998. But like the of the movies that I've seen the most in theaters, Revenge of the Sith was it. So I was, here we are 10 years down the line. I am pumped for this new movie to come out. They dropped that teaser trailer where you start hearing the music and you see the Lucasfilm logo, and all of a sudden Finn's head pops up in the deserts of a planet. And I'm like,
Tatooine.
I'm hooked.
Yep.
You have a stormtrooper with his helmet off. Who is this guy? Like, I wanted to know everything about this. And like, they made a big deal about John Boyega being this new character. And I'm like, this is so cool. Like,
he had some sci-fi bona fides too. He was, he was in Attack the Block.
Attack the Block. And he hadn't yet been in the Pacific Rim sequel yet. Right. That was in the works later. But like, yeah, he was in Attack the Block. Great movie. And so like I was ready to go. Like, and then on top of that, with all the new IP products coming out, like my ex-wife, both of us got, when we got married, we did a Star Wars themed wedding. So eat your heart out there, guys. But like when all this new merchandise started coming out, like she tried so hard to get me to buy all this stuff for her. I'm like, I don't make that much money.
Yeah. I remember one thing I remember also was the market, like some of the marketing they did. I think it was, and they really used the internet really good, because I do remember they did the this is back when like reaction channels were just starting out, and they did one where it was John Boyega and what my brain's gone.
Daisy Ridley
reacting to seeing themselves in the trailer for the first time and seeing themselves on screen, and Finn is just doing the typical guy, like what every guy would do is like, yes, this is awesome, and Daisy is bawling, like, because
Sure.
seeing herself in Star Wars, this is something that every
last
kid,
year
I think,
she was a waitress, so yeah, that's a big
and now you're in one of the biggest movies franchises, probably the biggest movie franchise in the world. And say what you will about the character and her portrayal, for her that had to be one of the biggest. I mean,
I've seen her in several things since then, and I think she's a fine actress. I don't think she gets enough credit. It's almost a Jake Lloyd level of like people just decided to hate the character, and so they were jerks to her as well. Kelly Marie Tran got a lot of the same, but I've seen her in other things, and she's great. I'm really pleased that they brought her in, and I think that it's, maybe I see this differently from the point of view of having a daughter, but I think it's cool that the main protagonist of the new trilogy is a girl, because I know many women who are Star Wars fans, and most of them describe a situation where growing up you were playing Leia or Mon Mothma, or you were out of luck.
Well, and as the 90s rolled around, some of them were starting to play Mara Jade.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I did not know any women Star Wars fans who were that into the lore. Mara Jade is a stranger to them. Although I almost got, I was told no Star Wars names for our daughter, and I wouldn't have gone here, but I did suggest later. I said, "Well, how about Mara? That's a pretty name." And oh, that is pretty. And then my wife goes, "Wait a minute," and she just Googles Mara Star Wars, and of course, almost got it past me.
I was thinking it well. At one point I thought about, before I met my wife, about naming my name, if I had a daughter, naming it Mara Jade. But then I realized that probably wouldn't go over too well with my wife, because my wife was dead set on one name.
Well, plus you end up teaching the kid to hate the property. Like if you name your son Clark Kent, he's not going to grow up liking Superman.
I actually knew
he's going to grow up getting made fun of about Superman.
Knew a girl. It was one of my ex-girlfriend's best friends, and she had a boy whose name was Kal-El.
Okay.
That's awesome.
I know a guy, and I didn't believe it until he showed me his driver's license. I know a guy whose middle name is Muad'Dib from Dune. His first name is Paul. Paul Muad'Dib, and it's not Atreides. They didn't go that far, but pretty impressive. I do. This is a bit off genre, but I do know two different couples who named their daughters. One is named Khaleesi, and one is named Daenerys, and they were both born in season 4. They are now named Callie and Danny.
What's we actually had a jumping genres again. We back when I was in high school and early college, we had a radio DJ up here, and he used to go by the moniker "The Real Bruce Wayne" because his name was Bruce Wayne.
Nice.
His parents just I don't know if they deliberately did that, but he lucked into one of the coolest alter egos possible. And
I met a guy at Star Wars Celebration in Orlando, 17, and he had his infant son with him, and the boy was named Kylo Ren Jackson or whatever. And I was in character, so I had to say, "Well, that's a lovely name for your boy. I wonder, have you seen the movie?" Spoiler alert: 13 minutes after 13 minutes of screen time, Kylo Ren murders his father. It's an odd character to name your son after, but hey, who am I to judge?
Well, let's kind of jump into the movie itself, and
we see some force powers on display very earlier in this film, where we haven't seen before. Kylo stopping the blaster bolt in midair, and then letting it go.
Visuals. I remember watching that and thinking that was one of the coolest visuals because we'd never seen that before. You can debate, the movie, the flaws and the stuff of the movie, but that scene right there, that just left me going like, oh, this character is for real. Like,
yeah. I gotta say, I wish that they had not taken his helmet off, because Adam Driver is a striking guy, but I think the character loses some of the menace when he doesn't have that like bear snout mask on. I thought he lost some of it when they took his mask off so much.
I kind of, in a way, I'm gonna disagree in a way.
I'm gonna say too, I liked the movie. I didn't think there was anything wrong with it that hasn't been wrong with other movies previously. And again, people decide to dislike it, and they dislike it for reasons that they totally give, for example, Empire Strikes Back, a complete pass on. Yeah. And one thing I got really into, like at the height of the furor over these sequel trilogies, is people just insisting that it's plot holes, and every plot hole I ever saw cited is just an answer you don't have yet. I think a hurdle that the sequels had to overcome is everybody watching these movies has had absolutely every question answered for them for the last 20 years. If you were born after 1985, by the time you saw the original trilogy, you had all 3 movies. And then 20 years later, you've got the prequel trilogy, and you know what's going to happen. Like you see Anakin Skywalker make dewy eyes at a girl, and so that's obviously going to be Luke and Leia's mom. You meet Obi-Wan Kenobi. You know where all these characters are ending up. The prequels just tell us how they get there. But the sequel, for the first time, we're shown a character that we don't have information about, and people just went insane. Because they watch the end of the movie, they don't know how Kylo Ren went dark, they don't know who Snoke is, and they could not handle not having that information. And I saw all the times it's a plot hole because we don't know how Kylo turned dark. We didn't learn that about Anakin until episode 3. Like you had to watch 5 other movies before you got there. You want everything given to you in the first one movie. It was frustrating to me.
Well, I think also a lot of people had. And I know this because I have friends who are like this, that, well, where's Thrawn? This isn't, or they said, well, this isn't Darth Caedus. This isn't, they had this idea of like, it should be this because they read the books.
Disney would definitely pay $2 billion or whatever and make a bunch of movies that you can spoil for $3 at a used bookstore, right?
Yeah. But going back to your comment about the mask and it taking the menace off, I don't know if I completely 100% agree with that. I can see where you're coming from, but I almost put it akin to in the first Halloween, when Michael takes off his mask, and instead of it being this horribly disfigured monster, it's this good-looking guy, like a normal person. And I think that makes it seem even more terrifying, because he looks handsome. He looks, he's not Vader when he takes the mask off. He's not scarred. He's not disfigured physically, which makes it even more just, I don't know, terrifying that he looks so normal, that
I can agree
evil
with
can look normal.
I loved they show Kylo Ren as a strong Force user, and just to skip a little bit further, Kylo Ren takes a center mass shot from Chewie's bowcaster, and he then goes on to fight two people at the same time and win, which is a point I'd like to make up with the bowcaster. Every other character we ever see shot with that thing is knocked back by it until they hit an obstruction, and they do not get up again. Kylo Ren is the only on-screen character shot by a bowcaster who survives it, and he goes on to have a fight. So that's, which I think says something for maybe his suit, but certainly his his power in the Force. I really like, I don't know, I really like the film. I think that it was a fairly glaringly obvious rehash of the first three movies. As I said, we started on Tatooine, and we go to the Empire Strikes Back series, and then we end up on Starkiller Base. I was worried that we were going to get the Darth Maul treatment for Kylo Ren, because all the marketing was triple bladed lightsaber this and Kylo Ren's mask that, and I was like, they're going to kill him 14 minutes in. I know it, but they didn't. They did do that to Phasma, but
that was Phasma. Phasma was the Boba Fett of the.
But I think it's great. I think that they have a more diverse audience, and so I think they cast the movie more diversely. A lot of people, when the movie came out, complained that the main three, instead of being three white people, is a woman, a black guy, and a Hispanic guy. But that's just how the audience is, guys. Like, that's the same reason that every terrorist cell you ever see in action movies is from some non-mentioned country, and they're all super diverse because we want to sell these movies in other countries. But we're making movies in a different generation, and Star Wars fans at that point were no longer this monolithic block of white dudes watching sci-fi. Like, there's more.
Hold on a second. When did Harrison Ford become Hispanic?
Oscar Isaac, Poe Dameron.
Oh, you mean the guy who's billed as one of the top three actors in the film and has less screen time than Harrison Ford. Got it.
I see what you did there. That's true. I'll give you that. In fairness, Poe Dameron is a terrible soldier who kills more people in The Last Jedi than any other character. More resistance people than any other character. And I love pointing this out, Poe Dameron, first off, and getting one movie ahead, but I got to say, Poe Dameron refuses a direct order from General Organa, and as a result, his entire squadron dies. Sure, we take out a dreadnought, but they've got more dreadnoughts. You don't have more pilots. And then later, he yells his secret plan, or he yells Holdo's secret plan over an unsecured line immediately after Finn tells him there's a stranger on board. And we see DJ go, and get it. So, like, almost.
Okay. You're jumping the gun there, man.
Wrong movie. Cut that out. Cut that out in post.
Anyway, we'll edit it.
To get back to Force Awakens, I liked the way that they sort of brought the audience back into the films. There was a little bit of member berries going on. They're like, hey, remember when we started on a desert planet? And but seeing Carrie Fisher as Leia again, seeing the Falcon, like there's some great moments, and I think they knew what they were doing. Han Solo steps on board the ship and says, "We're home." It's great. I really liked it.
I think most people that I've heard would agree, no matter what they think of the sequel trilogy as a whole, would say that Force Awakens was definitely probably the best of the sequel trilogy.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I think the diminishing turns has a pretty steady downward slope on those three films.
Well, so like one, I don't have a problem with nostalgia baiting so long as it's done well. Like the way that the characters
I've never heard that phrase, and I love it.
I like the way that it plays out. It works to an extent. I mean, you have the characters trying to leave Jakku. They leave on what Daisy Ridley erroneously calls a heap of garbage. And it's like, look, how does no one not recognize the Millennium Falcon after everything that happened in the?
Well, she didn't even know if it was true. She thought all of that was stories. Remember, the Empire began denying the existence of the Jedi almost immediately after the Purge.
Well, and her calling it a hunk of junk. That's a callback to the original movie when Luke Skywalker makes the scene of what a hunk of junk.
Right, because
Leia disses her too. It's a constant.
Right, but it's, I don't know. By that point, it doesn't feel like it should be this running gag. Because it's like, I don't know. It's the Millennium
Falcon. It's
also
been in cold storage on Jakku for a decade or more, right?
I wouldn't really call that cold storage, but okay. Anyway,
I don't think Unkar Plutt is polishing it. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah. Anyway,
and we don't know. We only the galaxy is as a big place. We don't know how many YT transports there are flying around. That she could just see it and it's like, oh, that's just a Corellian transport.
Yeah, but Corellian transports were known for being some of the best transports.
That's just true.
In the galaxy. So but the way that they introduce the characters is for the most part fairly organic, because as soon as they leave Jakku, they find themselves in trouble. They realize they're getting tagged by this other ship. Come to find out it's Han and Chewie.
Because of course he has an air tag on it.
Yeah. And then as they're progressing through the story, eventually gets to the point where you have both Resistance and First Order spies getting messages out to their people. And of course, Leia is going to show up. That was a great way to organically get her back into the story. Mm-hmm. And she stays in there in a fairly organic way.
Yeah.
And the fact that they do that nice little cliffhanger at the end with Luke.
Yeah.
I think that was brilliant. So the way that because my question going throughout the entire film, watching it for the first time on IMAX was, where's Luke? How are they going to bring Luke in? When am I going to see Luke? When am I going to see the Jedi that I grew up idolizing as a kid? Mm-hmm. And so it was all done well. What was and if you haven't seen the movie now, by 9.5 years of it being out, spoiler alert, but slap yourself. When Han is stabbed and killed by Kylo Ren, or if you're going off the theory that he activates the saber for Kylo to make it look like Kylo killed him, but he's actually killing himself.
Point of order, the novel explicitly says Kylo activated the lightsaber.
There you go. Okay. Anyway, I was hurt by it because Han is I like the character, but knowing what went on behind the scenes in the original trilogy and the decision that Lucas made to literally and figuratively freeze the character on screen so that in the event that negotiations and contract disputes could be fixed and resolved, we could get the character back. I knew going in that if Han Solo died, it would be because that's what Harrison Ford wanted 30 years ago.
Yeah. That's why I don't get the people who even to this day get so messed up as I hate it because they killed my character. If you wanted Han Solo in the movie, you were going to see Han Solo die.
Yeah,
it was that simple.
And the thing is that's what actually made the character a little bit more interesting.
Yeah,
because it felt a little redeeming, because here he was having shown himself to be a deadbeat dad. He can't pay his parking bills, and he's left his wife.
He's always under a death sentence for being a bad smuggler, constantly.
And so, walking out of the theater 10 years ago, Like, my ex-wife was pissed. Like, the only time I've ever seen her so mad is when she couldn't get her way in court. Like, she was legitimately ticked off that Han Solo died. And I'm like, you had to have seen this coming. She's like, yeah, I know, but it was stupid. I'm like, all right.
The other option was to recast Ford. Also, I mean, metatextually, they want to sell toys. Yeah. And old men toys are, I mean, I've got 3 shelves of them, but, you know, they want the new characters to come in.
Well, that is why old Han Solo is the most popular character on the toy shelves these days.
And, you know, I really wanted, I think I've said this before, but I really wanted somebody who can make films to do a racist Grandpa Han video where he meets Finn and just looks at him like,
get off my Endor.
No, he's just like, black guy, huh? I know a black guy. You know Lando? And just like, because that's what a guy of that generation would do.
Well, also, I think that the killing of Han Solo by Kylo, to jump ahead, it sets up because you needed to have Kylo do something that would make him, in the eyes of the fans, nearly irredeemable. And like with Vader, we saw that post with the killing of the younglings, even though we knew, you know, ahead of time, you know, that was his sort of thing to make him. So that was Kylo's things. I even remember people saying constantly after that, "Oh, Kylo can't be redeemed. Kylo can't be redeemed." I kept saying the same thing. Like, have you not watched Star Wars? Yeah, that's one thing I always, anytime anybody would say that, Kylo can't be redeemed, Kylo can't be redeemed, I'm like, he's literally wants to be his grandpa. Have he doesn't care about Star Wars?
I was disappointed they redeemed him. I had a whole meme I made about it of previous Star Wars characters who've killed their fathers, is Darth Bane, Emperor Valkorion, and Sheev Palpatine all killed their fathers. I was like, oh, he's in good company. This is going to be great.
Yeah,
I like, not to jump too far ahead, but I do like how they redeemed him. But I had this whole storyline in my head. I think we all had stories that we wanted to see. I wanted to see Kylo and Rey struggle with their path and end up crossing over. And by the 3rd movie, Rey is the villain and Kylo is the hero trying to save her.
That would have been interesting.
You either live long enough to die a hero or see yourself become the villain.
Dueling enthusiasts will tell you that Rey uses the same lightsaber form as Palpatine does. Instinctively, just the way that she fights is that's that form.
Very aggressive.
Yeah.
A lot of
she has to. Thrust. That was something that I thought made perfect sense to me. A lot of people felt that she was overpowered, or, you know, there's, you know, just why was she such a good fighter? She's such a good fighter because look at her. She looks like that. She's lived on Jakku completely alone since she was 5, and she's alive. She's obviously a good fighter. Unkar Plutt's not looking out for her.
Well, I mean, you get to see some of that a little bit on Jakku, where she is having to, where she rescues BB-8 initially,
right?
And like the way that she operates with that gaffy stick is almost the same way she was fighting with the lightsaber.
Yep, it's almost as though she's been fighting for her life all of her life, and it makes perfect sense.
And so, like, if you look at the way that she is fighting, like. There's a lot of times with the lightsaber where she is going and she's scooping low with it. And that's the same technique that she was using with the gaffy stick when she was tripping up Finn. She was going for ankles.
Yeah,
because she had a lower center of gravity. She wasn't as tall. And it was easier for her because, I mean, how many times do you have someone with a lightsaber, unless you're using a double-ended saber, how often do you have someone going for your feet?
I think it's so interesting the way that we see in each trilogy how lightsaber dueling is different. Like in the prequels, they are hopping around like ninjas and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon stuff because every duelist we see has trained their whole life with other duelists. They've been taught by masters. They're fighting against others who have been taught by these same masters. Yeah. It's a constant ongoing. You're always in school. And then by the time we go to the original trilogy, when Vader and Obi-Wan duel, people make jokes about like, God, we got old, but it makes sense in context because like these guys haven't had a proper lightsaber duel in 20 years, and I think it shows. And then in the sequel trilogy, they're just chopping wood. I mean, even all the footage of the of the Knights of Ren, we only see that one lightsaber. I think that's the only one they got. So Kylo's lightsaber experience has been to murder old men who are restrained and beat up control panels, and he fights savagely and uncontrolledly, and it doesn't go super well for him. But I really think it's I'm gonna say I think it's intentional. Like I think they make it work because Kylo's fighting style does not seem to be one that he's practiced much with. He's just been swinging that thing around in the woods for a while.
So with you just mentioned, that's something I wanted to kind of get your guys' thoughts on, because I've seen a lot of different opinions of that. Of what did you think of that scene where Kylo loses his temper? Because some people were like rolled their eyes, like, oh. Other people were like, oh, that's, can be almost a little terrifying, because you have this guy who's so, pretty. You could already see how powerful he is in the Force, and seems to have absolutely no control.
Like, it's one of those weird things. Like, I totally get where he's coming from, because like he is this character that is just so like it's just unbridled anger and passion, and that's great. The problem is it doesn't serve him well. It actually makes him a weak character, because all he's doing is throwing a temper tantrum. Yeah. I mean, yeah, Anakin threw temper tantrums when he was younger. Yeah. And he started to mouth off when he felt denied the rank of master. Yes. But as Vader, think about how he responded with his rage and his anger. The last time we got something massive was when he learned about Padme being dead, and we have the whole Frankenstein's monster thing happen, and he's telekinetically crushing all the droids. After that, everything he does is measured. Whether it's choking out the Moff on the Death Star, whether it's choking out Krennic, whether it's choking out Admiral Ozzel.
A lot of choking out in this list.
but the fact remains is that it is a quiet menace. It's not the outburst that you have to worry about. It's the quiet simmering underneath the surface. Like you're waiting for the explosion. And when the explosion doesn't happen, it is much more terrifying. Think about it in terms of like when you're a kid and you expect your parents to blow up at you. And instead of saying I'm angry with you, they say I'm disappointed.
Oh.
It is 1,000 times worse, right?
Yeah. No way. Anger is always worse. You get spanked when you're angry. Disappointed just means you feel bad.
I would rather have the physical torture.
I'd rather pay the fine.
Anyway, my point is, with Vader, it was always there simmering. That was his secret. He was always angry, but he never let it show until someone starts having difficulty breathing.
Yeah.
Well, the entity training Kylo Ren at that time had a vested interest in Kylo Ren not gaining control.
That's true.
Fostering that power, but not the focus.
I was just thinking that in kind of the same vein with how you have a character who all but worships Vader. I mean, you could literally say he worships Vader. He has his helmet there. He
prays to the helmet. Yeah.
Yeah. He talks to the helmet. He prays to the helmet, and wants to be as powerful or if not more powerful than Vader, and yet, as shown by his outbursts like that, he never will be. Because whereas Vader had control of his control of his anger, he used it as a tool. Kylo just uses it as a blunt instrument.
There's a very fine line in the training of the dark side where you want to use your anger. And Palpatine says it to Luke a number of times. Use your anger. It makes you powerful. It makes you powerful. But you can't let it use you. And that's what we see Kylo happening. Like there's a ragged edge of the dark side that not many can effectively use. And Kylo has been trained by someone who is keeping things from him for the purpose of keeping Kylo vulnerable.
Yeah. Because like unlike Vader had the suit, which kept him uncomfortable and unbalanced and kept him from being able to achieve his full strength. Yeah. And so that was always the distraction. With Kylo, it's psychological.
Yeah. And you have a character with Snoke. We haven't really talked about Snoke, who is using this rivalry between Kylo and the other character of Hux as a way to control both of them.
General Weasley.
He's pitting them both against each other, which I would say the shining moment for Hux in that movie, which I think that was the movie that he was kind of, his best movie, the movie that he of the trilogy he was in was that one, was I call it his Nazi speech.
Yeah.
Or sorry, no German speech. Sorry, YouTube. Sorry, I didn't say that word. When he's giving that speech, and you're like that gave me chills, but not in a good way. That was very 1930s Germanish, if you know.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
I've always said in any fictional genre, but particularly in sci-fi and fantasy, if you have a British accented character who wants order, it's always a problem.
Yeah,
that is 100% the villain. I call it the Umbridge Hux theory.
It's a very accurate theory.
Yes. I was really happy with, speaking of side villains, I was really happy with Captain Phasma's approach. I think Gwendolyn Christie does a great work. I really liked her in Game of Thrones. I was excited to see her in this. I was very disappointed with how the character was handled, but it's a nice scene. And if you read her novel, you learn that her armor is made from the plating of Palpatine's old shuttle. So she's wearing starship armor. And I like her approach. She's very military, but by the end we find out that she's pure mercenary. The fact that she shuts off the shields to Starkiller Base based on a vague threat really speaks to her survival instinct. And if you read her comic book, immediately after the events of Starkiller Base, she accesses the logs of Starkiller Base remotely to see who might know that she shut the shields down. She kills that person, and then she kills the pilot who took her to find that person. All's good. Yeah, who did it? I don't know. Well, I brought him to justice. I killed him. There he is. He's dead. Interesting character, mishandled towards the end, and I don't like how when we get to those films.
I said it before in this show. I've said it before in this show. I've said it before again. Phasma was the Boba Fett of the sequel trilogy. The character that was brought
successful in because Boba Fett is beloved decades later, and Phasma is largely joked about.
The trilogy version of that, of course, is Darth Maul. It's the same thing, became more popular, but it was the same thing. A character that was created, brought in, had cool armor, cool look. Everyone, that was the toy that everyone saw. The cool looking character, and then dies a very unambiguous.
At least Maul was killed by a Jedi.
Yeah.
For Lord's sake, Phasma dies by falling in a hole. And by the way, she's wearing her armor when she falls in that hole, and Finn falls in the exact same hole wearing nothing but a cloth uniform. He survives it somehow. She does not. That's, to me, that's the biggest plot hole in the trilogy.
Somehow,
what
Finn
killed
survived.
Right? Exactly. So, but I mean, all told, I think it's a great film. I really like the way that they put it together. I was surprised with what they did to Luke, and I think we'd find most people who most strongly dislike this film dislike it because of the handling of Luke.
With the Force Awakens, with him not being in it.
I think so.
That, but also him casually tossing the lightsaber over the shoulder.
Well,
that
doesn't come up. The lightsaber toss doesn't come up until the beginning of The Last Jedi.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. You're right. My bad.
Again, you're jumping films, man.
They all run together for me. I think
but
that
I do.
People expected Superman Luke that they had in 20 years of the EU, where he could do no wrong and nobody questioned him and everything he did was exactly right.
Well, and I think even going back to what Garrett asked about with not having Luke in this movie, I do think there are people that they wanted from the very beginning Luke, Han, and Chewie and Leia in the Falcon
having the very beginning.
That's what people. I think there was a group of fans that wanted that from the very beginning. They just we just want Han, Luke, Leia, and Chewie going around doing stuff.
Well,
and everybody else just be side characters.
In a big way, The Force Awakens shows us almost immediately that the happy ending of Return of the Jedi was happy for 20 minutes. But we see evil is conquered, good is triumphed, Han and Leia are together, everything is great. And within the first half hour of Force Awakens, we learn that Han and Leia are not together, that their sun has gone dark, that Luke is missing. All the conclusions of Return of the Jedi are thrown out the window by Force Awakens, which is how you tell a continuing story. I mean, you're not going to make 3 more movies, but everything's great. But I think that was a problem a lot of people had.
I think that this the way that you look at through the novels and what we've seen of some of the TV shows that maybe the line from Spaceballs was right, that evil will always triumph over good because good is dumb.
See, here's the problem I have with it, and if you change nothing about the character origins, you keep Finn being a stormtrooper who defects, you keep Poe being a rogue fighter pilot, you keep Rey being who she is, and you change the origins of the characters. You remove the legacy characters entirely. You don't even write them into the script, and you set the story even further out than just 30 years.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
Still play it out. You could have new factions fighting a different version of the original battle, but this time you've got this new dark character. He doesn't have to be related to anybody, and the only thing from the legacy that he is tied to is he emulates Vader. Okay, he emulates Vader, but he doesn't, because he doesn't know everything about
Darth
Vader.
Emulator.
But because he doesn't know everything about Vader's history, because he doesn't know the Jedi side of it, because that was scrubbed from history, because he doesn't know all the ins and outs of what Vader did when he was on his own personal time, all he sees is what was public knowledge. And so he uses that, but because it's an imperfect emulation, it makes him an unstable character.
I like that.
I mean, it would make for a much stronger story, because then you don't have to. I mean, like you said, with the prequels, we knew where everything was headed, because by the time you get to the end of Revenge of the Sith, basically you're playing that, and to an extent Rogue One, play this weird game of getting your original characters into their starting positions, which when you're writing prequels becomes problematic. When you're writing a sequel and you've already got the next story in line already in your head, you're then writing the ending for the story that you're already working on to get them into that place that you need them to be. It was actually smart the way that George Lucas did the original trilogy, and even the prequel trilogy to an extent, because with the first film, Empire Strikes Back takes place, 6 months after the events of the original film.
Right.
Return of the Jedi takes place a year later. So the starting positions are a little different. In some cases, they're better. Some cases, they're worse. You look at the prequel trilogy. There's a time jump of 10 years between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. And so that gives time for things to happen where you don't have to worry about getting characters into the starting position for the next film. All we need to do is say we're going to jump ahead, because then again you get another time jump at the start of Revenge of the Sith, and it's been like 3 or 4 years because the war's been raging on. And anything that you need to fill in those gaps with can be done in the Clone Wars cartoon. And for casual fans who are just watching the movies, it's not going to make a whole lot of, it's not going to make it make or break anything for them. The problem with the sequel trilogy is we have to keep these characters in position because we're already planning for the next movie in the sequence. And if you pay attention to how the movies in the sequence play out, they're all right on top of each other. Where episode 7 ends, episode 8 begins. Where episode 8 ends, episode 9 begins. There is no break in anything.
And there was no break in the release schedule either. I know you guys have heard me complain about this, but the first 6 movies that came out were separated by 3 years each, trilogy. And then the new movies came out 1 a year, and then they dropped Solo in the middle of that. So Solo was 6 months from the previous and 6 months till the next.
Yeah. Because you had, because in 15 you had Force Awakens, in 16 you had Rogue One. Because Rogue One came out around the time that my son was born. Then in 17 you had Last Jedi, 18 you have Solo, and then 19 you have Rise of Skywalker. 5 movies in 5 years, and it was oversaturated.
To circle back to the hype Mark was talking about earlier, I believe that Star Wars is the reason Toys R Us went out of business in this country, because they had this huge wave of merch, and we all bought all of it for Force Awakens because we're like, we didn't think there'd ever be more Star Wars toys. Now there are. Give them to us. So Force Friday, I was at Toys R Us in costume at midnight. So were several others. And then they thought that was going to be the case for every movie subsequent. And no, when Rogue One came out, we hadn't had 15 years of there will never be another Star Wars. And I feel like they invested in toys for the first couple of movies of a sequel, thinking this is going to be huge every movie, and it just wasn't. And that's how we end up with Rise of Skywalker. We get one Knight of Ren. We have a couple, it's like a dozen characters are represented in the toy line for Rise of Skywalker. Perfect opportunity for a new zombie Cenobite Palpatine. Give me a Black Series of him hanging from the gantry, for Lord's sake. But nope, there's no Palpatine figure. You got 7 different C-3POs from the first 6 movies, and just nothing. And that's why I think Toys R Us died, because they invested time and shelf space in toys that people were just not buying.
Yeah, it was. It was kind of weird too, because I remember the characters that came out with the old Kenner line during the original trilogy, especially Return of the Jedi. You started getting a bunch of random characters who were in Jabba's palace, because they had that place that you got Jabba the Hutt. I remember having a Bib Fortuna figure. I remember having a Weequay from the skiff and the barge. I had a bunch of these characters, but that's what if you had one version of Lando from Cloud City, but then you had the Bounty Hunter version, great. You didn't have 5 or 6 different versions. I don't even know why they needed to have multiple versions of C-3PO, because how often do you need multiple versions of the same droid when he doesn't change at all? Speaking of changes that were completely unnecessary, 3PO's entire throwaway dialogue to Han about, oh, you're probably wondering why I have this red arm. No one's ever wondering that, because for the last 30 years, nobody even paid attention to the fact that one of your feet was painted the wrong color.
That's funny. I have argued that with people where they're like, that's not it. And they talk about Mandela effect and he's all gold. I have an Empire Strikes Back storybook published in 1980 that clearly has a silver foot.
Yeah.
I even had somebody argue with me that it was the reflection of the snow because he was at the scene that I have as a picture on the book is in Hoth. It's just a reflection from the snow. Dude, both legs are standing on snow. But anyway, that's funny.
See, I would have loved to. I think a great Han
right?
line for that. Great Han line for that. Whenever 3PO says that is for him to sarcastically say like, yeah, actually, yeah, I was really wondering what is up with that. Why? And then 3PO started to go in like, it's like, I don't
and
care.
he just walks away.
Just, yeah.
Like, I don't know. Like, I think probably my favorite line in the entire and this gets me talking about favorite lines from this film, which there aren't many, but it's the one that keeps getting used on memes constantly. Is where Han gets onto Finn about how the Force works.
That's not how the Force works.
And I'm like, it's so applicable because like it as a on the overall, I feel like the way that Finn tries to explain using the Force in that film kind of sits in as a stand-in bit of dialogue describing how Disney handled Star Wars, at least on film and in live action, because like they forgot that Star Wars, as Brian has said repeatedly, and Mark, you've said this as well, that Star Wars used to be an event. It used to be a big deal. And they forgot that. They misunderstood what made Star Wars so awesome to the fans, what made it so beautiful. And yeah, it's great that we're getting all this content now, but it's too much.
It's no fun to dress up in costume for a midnight release of a TV show.
It's no fun to dress up in costume for a midnight release of like anything anymore because it's become oversaturated.
Yeah. I've been to every movie in that costume at midnight. And but by the time Solo and Rise of Skywalker come out, I'm like, I'm kind of tired of putting up this gig every 6 months.
I told you about my I think it was it was not Phantom Menace. It was the first of the prequel trilogy.
Force Awakens.
No, prequel.
Phantom Menace. Phantom Menace.
Phantom Menace. And going to one of the it was the second time going and fighting with a lightsaber, fighting a Klingon with a lightsaber. There was a group from a Star Trek fan club that was there and had a couple of Klingons, and I wasn't dressed up, but they had I borrowed a lightsaber from somebody and had a duel with a Klingon using a double-bladed lightsaber.
Huh.
I
Very
lost.
Nice.
But yeah, it was fun.
With honor.
I did.
I think the coolest crossover cosplay I've ever seen. I just saw a video of this, but it was at a Renaissance fair when a bunch of Star Trek cosplayers showed up at this Ren fair, and they act like they're an away team.
Yeah, I've seen that before.
But then a staff member of the Renaissance fair pulls them aside and shows them he's got a Federation badge inside his cloak. He's like, "What are you doing? Have you never heard of the Prime Directive? You are messing everything up. Get out of here." And they're like, "You're the best." I like that.
I like that.
I like when you play along with stuff. There was a guy, I forget if I told you guys, there was an Imperial officer in Chicago who was writing up uniform infractions using the Imperial Handbook as his guide.
Yeah.
And the Imperial Handbook has notes in the margin. And after I saw him lecturing people for violating the handbook, I, as Palpatine, asked to see his handbook, and then I lectured him for having handwriting in it. "You've defaced it. It's shameful. Is that Han Solo?" So he wrote himself.
Have you seen the lady? She does the Imperial HR. I think it's HR.
Yes.
It's like she just goes around writing doing the same thing, like writing infractions of people, and Yeah, like people wanting time, like they got skits like people wanting time off, and she's got like put in the time off for them so they can go do
great.
stuff.
I like to give Vader's orders and then be mad at them that they haven't done the thing I told the last Vader to do. Like, I don't understand how costumes work. I yelled at one guy. I was like, now see here, Vader, this is ridiculous. I've told you 3 times already. I told you once when you were a little heavier, once when you were 2 people, once when you were a black woman, and I'm telling you again now, find Skywalker and bring him to me. I don't know why.
Wait, why are you wearing pink? I thought your armor was black. To which that Vader responds with, it's not pink, it's lightish red.
Is that a Lego joke?
No, that's a red versus blue joke.
Oh yeah, I'm not familiar, but there's famously there's no pink Lego bricks. They're like dusky rose or whatever.
Oh,
well, all told, just to kind of wrap up, I thought The Force Awakens was very promising. I was disappointed with how the trilogy went. I think they're fine films, but I saw each of them 3 times in the theater, and I've seen each of them fewer times since getting the DVD than any other Star Wars film. I'm glad they're there.
I will not to kind of spoil the rest of it, but I will say this. I don't have the utter hate that some people have for the sequel trilogy. I will say this, though. Force Awakens is the only one of the trilogy that I've seen more than once.
I've seen them all more than once. Where
I take that. I've seen Last Jedi twice, but I haven't seen Rise of Skywalker more than once.
Where I don't know. I just it's not rewatchable for me. Like, I've seen them a couple of times. Like, I saw Force Awakens twice in theaters, and the reason for that is because I saw it on opening day in December, and then I saw it right after the New Year.
Yeah.
With a group of students that when I used to do youth ministry. And I will say what always annoyed me is I had one particular student that I worked with who kept coming up and talking about Darth Jar Jar and how I missed the deleted scene. I'm like, just shut up.
There's no deleted scene.
Yeah.
Just stop it before I Darth Vader you to death.
I got kicked out of a Facebook group over that because this one I forget who it was, but a poster insisted that was canonical because directorial intent was the same, directorial intent overrode what was on the screen. I was like, so Han Solo then is supposed to be a big green furry monster, and Luke is actually canonically a woman, because that's how George Lucas intended it from the beginning. And I said, look, I am open to this. If you think that's the case, show me 1 second of screen time or one sentence from any canonical written work showing it to be the case. And I got reported and kicked out of the group, which is probably better off.
Yeah.
Interesting fan theory. I think it would have been cool if they'd done it that way. But that comes back to my theory that Palpatine is such a powerful villain. The only way to defeat him is via metatext, by taking away his power by saying, oh, well, Snoke is Plagueis, because obviously Palpatine's never really been a Sith at this time.
I feel like Snoke, and we'll talk about this more next month when we talk about Last Jedi, but I feel like Snoke was probably one of the biggest letdowns of the entire sequel trilogy, just because there was so much promise there, and it was like he was as discardable as the rest of the trilogy.
They pulled a Marvel style. It was Agatha all along, right? It was Palpatine all along.
And it's one of those things where I will never be able to forgive Rian Johnson for that.
Yeah. A lot of people feel that way.
Yeah.
I agree. I thought it wasn't clear to me that Snoke wasn't a giant from Force Awakens, because his holo projection is huge. And I wasn't sure if maybe that's how big he really is. I thought that'd be kind of cool. And I liked the theory that he was Mace Windu. I liked...
So wait a minute. If he was Mace Windu, did he pull Michael Jackson and bleach his skin?
It wasn't explained. It was just a passing. Someone saying, what if he's Mace Windu? And they had is that how he got scarred up? I liked the idea that it was a non-Sith tradition of dark side user, but it wasn't. It was just Palpatine. I did like how Snoke played the two of them together, although I did I didn't think that Snoke's gold lame robe was very dark sidey, but who am I to judge? But yeah, I agree. I think it was a little bit of a letdown for me as well. I was excited to see a new villain, and I'm torn. Like, I was like, oh, cool, new villain, new tradition. But wait, my guy. Oh, my guy's back. Oh, my guy's back. just a, it's. I'm conflicted about these films. I liked them. My standard approach was I would see them on opening night at midnight in costume. I would also go to the following Saturday, like a 10 o'clock showing, also in costume. And then I'd see it one other time, like a couple weeks later, usually with my dad, like on an after.
Yeah.
And sometimes
you gotta have the one time of watching it.
It's fun to go to a Star Wars movie that's been out for 2 weeks.
Yeah. You gotta have your one time of seeing it where you're just super excited and you just go in just like, yes, this is awesome. And then, maybe a couple, and then you have to have your time of going with, to really watch it, to sit down and be like, okay, now I'm going to really watch it. I'm going to really focus on what's going on, see what I missed, type of a thing.
I think they waded in a little too fast is all. I mean, Kathleen Kennedy's done amazing work in her career. I don't hold it against her. I just think that they didn't, as Garrett said, I think they fundamentally failed to understand what we liked about Star Wars, what we like about Star Wars. And I don't think they measured up. They gave us some fine movies. I think that if you saw these movies first, you would probably think that they were fine. And I think in 20 years, there will be kids who have grown up with this as their first Star Wars, and they'll love it as much as we loved it when, I think just, it's kind of like high school. You hate it when you're there, but you love it 20 years later. And I think there's a generation of kids who Force Awakens was their first Star Wars movie, and they're going to like it just as much as we like episode 4, episode 1. I mean, you remember how badly the prequels were received, and now I think they're pretty well respected.
It's weird because I remember you talk about how the prequels were received. For the most part, aside from the tedious politics, for the most part, I think the Phantom Menace was received pretty well. And that was the how well I remember it. And that's, God, almost 30 years. Holy crap. But then you look at for example, the Attack of the Clones, that one didn't do as well because it was so unevenly paced and very CGI heavy. And then you get to Revenge of the Sith, and Revenge of the Sith had probably the best plot of the three.
Mm-hmm.
And it was paced, but all three of them were paced very weird, where it gets long and drawn out. Like the Phantom Menace, I'll still fall asleep throughout the majority of the pod racing sequence because all it is pod racing.
And that weird sound effect.
Yeah, it's very meditative. That's what helps me fall asleep.
It's funny.
But then, you get to Attack of the Clones, and I'll fall asleep throughout most of the early sequence, the first third of the movie, because of just how unevenly paced it is. And then with
Wake Me Up when Dooku shows up.
Right. And then when Revenge of the Sith, it's once you get to the point where Obi-Wan heads to Utapau. At that point, I'm crashed out because there's so many things that happen in that sequence, and it's all boring for me.
I just can't get past episode 2's assassin droid that cuts the hole in Padme's window and then puts 2 Cajon worms into her room. Shoot her! She's right there. What are you trying to do? Cover up the assassination attempt? How did these worms get in here? Maybe through that hole that was cut through the window. No, that must be naturally occurring. It doesn't make any sense. Stay tuned for my TED Talk after the show. Well, I think we covered it. I did like the film. I again, diminishing returns on these movies. I will defend them as decently watchable, but I don't think anybody should like them if they don't like.
It was entertaining for what it was.
I can't convince someone that their favorite flavor isn't their favorite flavor, and I can't convince someone that a flavor they dislike they should. So yeah, I respect you if you don't. And there are folks listening to this right now. If you hate these movies, man, I nothing but love for you. You're right to hate them. I think they're fine. I'm right to like them too.
If you were to give The Force Awakens a letter grade, what would you give it?
B minus.
High C, C plus.
Yeah, I'm thinking B minus, C plus, borderline.
Yeah, like it's decent. It's watchable. It's probably the best of the sequel trilogy. It's the most rewatchable, I think, of the sequel trilogy.
I love the introduction. I love seeing the technology.
Yeah.
Because, most times when we see something new in Star Wars, it is referred to as an ancient technology that's been revived. The 3 lightsabers like that. But BB-8, the BB model is really cool. I love how they did the dialogue. I'm sure you guys know who voiced the dialogue for BB-8.
Yeah, Bill Hader.
Yeah, and John Ralphio from Parks and Rec.
No.
Ben
Schwartz.
There you go. The two of them, and then they did the lines, but then the lines were turned into anyway. I think that's great, and I have more than one toy BB-8. Nice addition to the canon.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Let's wrap things up then. First of all, next week we are going to be going into our lore, as we're going to be talking about the planet Batuu. And talking in the lore of Batuu.
Also, just so you guys are aware, we will be doing a Q&A at the end of April. Since there's 5 Wednesdays, we'll have 5 episodes in the month of April. So we're going to be doing a Q&A. You guys get to ask us questions about how much, maybe it's a question of a trivia question for us to stump our Star Wars trivia. I think between the 3 of us, we'll probably dominate, or you can ask us something, quasi-personal, and we may or may not make fun of each other for that. So, you know.
I'm here for that.
Yep.
I had a funny one of those today. You know the little foldy paper things that kids play with, like a fortune teller, pick a color, pick a number?
Yeah.
Yep.
So my daughter has learned how to make those. She's playing with them today. And I was reminded of, in 7th grade, a girl in my class made one of those just for me. And every answer was, "You're a nerd." No matter what I picked, it would go to "You're a nerd." So there's my personal window. Anyway, well, great chat with you guys, man. I think this was a good entry to the trilogy. A lot of my distaste for the follow-on movies stems from the hope I felt from this one.
Yeah, I think a lot of people that way. But we'll get to that next month when we review.
Tune in next month.
Hopefully you'll tune in for the other weeks before that too, but
hopefully.
Stay tuned.
Yeah. Stay tuned.
Well, where should folks find us while they're waiting to tune in?
Well, let's start with you, Brian.
Yeah, let's start with you, Brian.
Find me over at the Sith Library and Archives, a lovingly curated collection of Sith culture and lore located on Facebook. You can find me out there. I post as Darth Corosis, but we have several admins out there sharing good stuff. We try to keep it light on the holidays, and every Sunday we like to do jokes. But in the meantime, if you're interested in Dark Side, Empire, First Order, all the bad stuff, we're out there.
All right.
As for me, you guys can find me on Instagram and X at GKJ_publishing, where I talk about my books. In fact, I just have my newest one come out a little over a month ago. It's called Midnight Playground. It's an anthology of original short stories, from science fiction to fantasy to ghost stories and everything in between. You can also check out my show, The Right Way, on YouTube, just by searching for GKJ Publishing. On that show, we talk book recommendations, author interviews, and creative writing tips. In fact, this coming Saturday, I have my spring preview as we are segueing into Author Awareness April, which is an interview marathon. 4 great authors I'm going to be interviewing over the course of the 4 weeks of April.
Awesome. As for us right here, you can find us through all social medias now, whether your email, our email is warthestars1@gmail.com, and everything else is through our Instagram, X, and YouTube. Just search at warthestars77 for all socials. You can check us out there. Remember to keep voting on the March Wars Madness over on Twitter and on Instagram, or Instagram page. Check out, we are of course a fine member of the Feast of Fandoms podcast, Feast of Fandoms on YouTube. Check us out there. Check us out all the other shows there, including Garrett on Snackame. You can check them out there. And check us, if you want to support the show, Ko-fi.com. That's ko/fi.com/War of the Stars, or you could check us out our Spreadshirt shop, spreadshirt.com/shop/war-of-the-stars. Check out our cool merch there. That will about do it. As always, remember, thanks for watching. Remember, this is not just my Star Wars. This is not just your Star Wars. This is our Star Wars. Until next week, may the Force be with you.